Sup YouTube, this is the chemist guy, and welcome to the second video in this series of Maxwell's equations, which I guess I started more than a year back. So I'm pretty sure everybody knows what a crazy year this has been, and plus I've had a lot on my plate in this year itself. So I couldn't really update the channel. I put it on the back burner for a while, but now I'm trying to find time to do more, and today it was as good an opportunity as any, so I decided to go ahead. I'm using a notebook right now because my boards are occupied currently, so I can't use them, even though they give a way better aesthetic. What you see right now is basically just a recap of all the math that we covered in the previous video, there are 4 basic topics in mathematics which you need to know and need to know how to apply before you can solve Maxwell's equations. So the 4 topics are the curl operator, which is a vector calculus operator, the divergence operator, which is also a vector calculus operator. You need to know the concept of the partial derivatives and partial differentiation, because the Maxwell's equations are partial differential equations, and you need to know the basics of vector fields. So what I have written are a few formulae which are required to solve Maxwell's equations. The curl formula, I have taken some random vector a bar, resolved it into the 3 components ax, ay and az, and written out a formula for the curl operator. Now this symbol, as you can see, is basically the symbol for the partial derivative. So the regular differentiation formula, if you know it, it looks somewhat like this, the notation, but for partial derivatives it looks like this. And in partial differentiation, what you do is you basically take the variable you are differentiating with respect to, that is x in this case, y in this case, z in this case, etc., and you treat all the other variables in the equation as constants. So, and these are 2 integral formulae that you will find useful when doing Maxwell's equations. The integral of the divergence of a vector with respect to volume is as good as integral of the vector itself with respect to area. And similarly, integral of the curl of a vector with respect to area is equivalent to integral of the area itself, of the vector itself, with length or 1 dimensions. So that would suffice as a recap for the math that we require. So today we are going to move on to the physical quantities which participate in Maxwell's equations and how to work with them. So guys, the physical quantities in Maxwell's equations can be broadly classified into 4 kinds. Okay, so let me just make columns. I'm bad at this. Okay, yes. So the 4 kinds of quantities are basically fields, then we have flux densities, we have field sources, and we have the physical constants. Okay, so in field there are 2 fields which we require to know about: the electric field, which is represented by a capital E, and the magnetic field, which is represented by a capital H. In flux densities, we need to know 2 again corresponding to these fields. There is the electric flux density, represented by a capital D, and there is the magnetic flux density, which is represented by a capital B. In field sources, we need to know two. Firstly, the electric charge density, which is represented by rho V. I'll come to why it is represented later when we first start to work with it, but yeah, just suffice it to say it's represented by rho V. And the electric current density, which is represented by a capital J. And in the physical constants, the first one, again there are two. It is known as permittivity, which is represented by a Greek letter epsilon. Okay, this is epsilon. And the second one is known as permeability, which is represented by the Greek letter mu. Okay, great. So as you can see, there are 8 different physical quantities that we need to discuss and need to understand as well as possible before we get into resolving and at least understanding Maxwell's equations. So obviously I don't think I'll be able to do all of them in a single day, but I'll try to cover the fields and the physical constants in this video, and then I'll probably make another video for flux densities and field sources. So let's get started with the field. Now, for working with electric field, I'm pretty sure, at least I'm assuming that you are familiar with Coulomb's law. Coulomb's law basically states that the electrostatic force between two charges Q1 and Q2 is proportional to the product of the charges, and it is inversely proportional to the distance, the square of the distance between the charges. Okay, so this is another example of an inverse square law. And when we apply to remove the proportionality and put in an equality, we need to put in a constant. So the equation becomes F is equal to Q1 Q2 upon 4 pi epsilon naught r square, where this expression 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught is a constant, right? And this symbol, this epsilon naught, it's basically known as the permittivity of free space, and it is a fundamental constant of our universe, and we'll talk about it when we get to permittivity. Now, the electric field by a point charge, any one of these charges on the other charge, can be found out by setting any one of these charges as 1, right? But how do the particles know about each other? If we imagine an isolated charge at some location X, does it have an effect away from this location? And the answer is yes. And this charge is surrounded by an electric field everywhere in space. Yes, it is defined as the force a charge of 1 coulomb would experience if it was placed at a location X. So that is, it is the force per unit charge. So we can say that E is equal to Q upon 4 pi epsilon naught r square. Okay, this basically gives us the magnitude of an electric field. Now the electric field is a vector quantity, which means it has a magnitude and a direction. So basic convention is that if we have a positive charge, the electric field radiates outwards from a positive charge. Yes, and if we have a negative charge, the electric field converges into the negative charge. This is a rather fundamental and rather important and extremely useful result, which actually we are going to derive a little later when we discuss the first Maxwell's equation. And another thing to tell here is that the electric field, the dimension is force per unit charge, so that is Newton per coulomb, but more conveniently its unit is written as volt per meter. Yes. So that's pretty much all we need to know about the electric field. Let's move on to the magnetic field. Okay, so suppose you have this really long wire. Okay, so suppose it has got an infinite length. Okay, infinite length, and it carries some current, we'll call it I. Okay, now a fundamental equation, it's known as the Biot-Savart law. I'm not going to go into the details of it right now, but it tells us that the magnetic field at a point which is a distance r from this current carrying wire is equal to I upon 2 pi r. Okay, and I'm pretty sure you all are familiar with the right hand thumb rule, which gives you the direction of the magnetic field. And the magnetic field, so basically the right hand thumb rule is that you point your thumb in the direction of the current. Okay, or your open palm, point your thumb in the direction of the current, and then curl your fingers. Okay, so whatever direction your fingers curl, that is the direction of the magnetic field. So if I see from the point in which the current is coming inside, the magnetic field is going to be anti-clockwise, and if I look at it from the other side, the current is going outwards, the magnetic field is going to be clockwise. So if I were to draw the magnetic field lines over here, they would look something like this. Okay, and the direction would be, according to the right hand thumb rule, this. Yes. So in the world of electromagnetics, as I have just shown, there are two main types of fields. The electric field arises due to electric charge, and if we suppose that the charges are moving, we know the flow of electric charge is electric current, which we measure in the units of amperes. So it turns out that electric current produces a magnetic field, which we know as the H field. So unlike the electric field, which points towards or away from charges, the magnetic field encircles the electric current. Yes. So the unit of magnetic field, so if you now, one more thing to say here is that from this equation you can see that the magnitude of the magnetic field decreases as 1 by r increases, which means the magnetic field is inversely proportional to the distance from the wire, and it is also directly proportional to the current, right? So it's a vector quantity, of course, it's a field, so a vector quantity. The magnitude is given by this equation, the direction will be given by your right hand thumb rule. So as you can see from this equation itself, its unit is going to be ampere per meter. Yes. So I guess that covers the basics of the field. So I'm moving on to the physical constants. Okay guys, so the first physical constant we need to understand is permittivity. Okay, so to understand permittivity, imagine that you have two charged plates. Okay, suppose this one is positively charged, this one is negatively charged. Okay, and they are separated by a distance, say d. Okay, now as we know, there are going to be atoms inside in the middle of these plates, right? There is air in them, and if you have a little bit of if you have a base of chemistry, then you will know that molecules are essentially dipoles. They consist of charged particles. So when an external electric field is applied to them, they will orient themselves in such a way that, suppose you have a diatomic molecule here, the negatively charged particle will face the positively charged side of the plate because opposites attract, and vice versa, the positively charged side will face the negatively charged side of the plate. So permittivity is basically a measure of how much these molecules oppose the external electric field. So as we just discussed, the formula for the electric field due to a single charged particle is written as Q upon 4 pi epsilon naught r square, right? Where epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space or vacuum. Yes, and its value is approximately equal to 8.85 times 10 to the power minus 12 farad per meter. The unit is not really important at the moment because it is basically the permittivity of vacuum where no atoms are present. So we can also add a term. Suppose we are not considering the field in vacuum, and if we are considering it in a material medium, then we cannot use epsilon naught, right? We'll just have to use the permittivity of the medium itself, because permittivity is medium specific. So we write it as 4 pi epsilon r square, and the value of epsilon is got as epsilon r times epsilon naught, where epsilon r is known as the dielectric constant of the material, and this goes into the concept of capacitors and capacitance, which I won't be getting into right now. So the dielectric constant, suffice it to say that it is always greater than or equal to 1, which means the electric field here in this equation is always going to be lesser than the field you are going to get in vacuum, right? Okay, great. So that's pretty much all you need to know about permittivity. So we move on to the last part of today's video, and that is the permeability. Okay guys, so as it turns out, just like electric and magnetic fields are so closely related, the permittivity and permeability are also pretty closely related. So just as the permittivity is associated with the alignment of bound molecules in electric dipoles, like electric dipole moments, the permeability, it relates to the orientation of bound magnetic particles within a material. So in a simple sense, it's basically a measure of how easily a magnetic field can pass through a material medium. So the permeability of vacuum is denoted as mu naught. Okay, and we'll see a formula relating to this later on when we talk about the fields, and the value of mu naught is actually pretty precise. Now the value of epsilon naught, I gave it as an approximation. As you can see, it's about 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 12, but the value of mu naught is pretty precise, and it equals exactly 4 pi into 10 raised to minus 7 Henry per meter. Okay, again, you don't need to concern yourself with the units. So farad is a unit of capacitance, Henry is a unit of self-inductance, which are concepts which I won't be discussing right now. And similarly, just like permittivity, the permeability of a material medium is given as mu, which is written as mu r times mu naught. Okay, where mu r is known as the relative permeability of the medium. Yes, and unlike the dielectric constant epsilon r, mu r can actually be less than 1, it can be equal to 1, or it can be greater than 1. So it cannot be equal to 1, I'm sorry, it can be lesser than 1, and when it is lesser than 1, the material is known as a diamagnetic material, and when it is greater than 1, it is known as a paramagnetic material. Okay, so the permeability of materials basically helps us to decide how easily we can induce a magnetic field inside a material. So if we talk about ferromagnetic materials like iron, cobalt, nickel, etc., the value of mu for them is pretty high, because the relative permeability is very high for such materials. So they are kind of, in a sense, extremely paramagnetic materials, right? So I guess that brings us to an end of this video. So as promised, we discussed half of the 8 quantities. Okay, we talked about the electric field, we talked about the magnetic field, we talked about the permittivity and the permeability. So in my next video, I will be talking about the remaining 4 units: the electric flux density, magnetic flux density, electric charge density, and electric current density. So signing off for now. See you all soon.